Hello, I'm Cleo Franklin. I want to welcome you to my new podcast, Conversations with Cleo. And I just wanted to tell you what this podcast is all about. I'm interested in real conversations with ordinary people doing extraordinary things, people that are making a difference in our lives from around the world, people that have purpose, but also passion and not afraid to do the hard things. And it all begins with storytelling. Each of my guests are going to be folks with incredible stories. And what I'm going to try to do as a host is not get in the way of those stories. I would like to amplify and promote those stories of interest so that it will possibly inspire you, give you a reason to pause to consider, but also sit down, relax, have a cup of coffee, cup of tea, and just enjoy the messaging from the stories that you're going to hear. I like to say I'm very delighted today for several reasons. My podcast is all about celebrating the power of storytelling. There's no better platform than storytelling. This has been around since the beginning of time. And I think the best ideas are basically translatable when they're told in a story. And the best stories are not only told, they're retold, and they take dreams to reality. So it's a platform, it's a catalyst, it's a gateway. And today's story is really a successful story and one that I would love for you to hear more about. I want to introduce you to my cousin, and that's full disclosure, we're family, but regardless, if there's excellence in and outside of family, it should be celebrated. And I'm proud to celebrate my cousin, Markus Flynn, who is the Executive Director of Black Men Teach. Markus, welcome to the podcast.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Very
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. And let's get right to it. We're going to chop it up a little bit. I'd like for you to introduce yourself and just tell a little bit about you and the things that really drive you and that you're passionate about. Why don't you share with the audience?
No, I appreciate it. I think I'm simple. I really do. I think I'm a person who at the core holds this really strong foundational belief that education is the quality of life risk factor that has the most residual benefit. And if you invest fully there, that's where you see like the rising tide lifts all boats effect. And so for me, I think my passion has always revolved around community uplift, specifically Black community uplift. Everything I've done in my life to date has really aligned with that. And the work that I do now with Black Men Teach is a perfect example. And it's really a tool where I manifest my passions, really my life's purpose. And so it's a little bit about who I am, right? Like, I'm from just outside of Chicago. I know home for you, obviously, Chicago.
Yes.
Based in the Twin Cities right now, leading this organization, Black Men Teach, for about 3 years. And before that, I was a classroom teacher. And really what put me in this position to lead this organization is the fact that I allowed my passions to determine where I decided to live. When I was in grad school at Iowa State, I was studying to be an epidemiologist. And early in that process, I remember I had a mentor who told me that if you're able to align your passion and your talent, that at that intersection is where you find your purpose. And I remember being fixated on that idea. And I started doing almost like these daily reflections where I'm thinking about what does this mean for me? And early in that process, I realized it wasn't epidemiology. And so for me, the obvious piece was like, how do I determine what it is? And so in that process, it's funny because all of the study that I was doing really helped lead me in this direction because I realized in these, and again, epi is this longitudinal observational method to studying disease. And so we look at exposure outcome relationships and how do applied interventions change those. And I would realize often in these studies that we did, if you did not control for education as a confounding variable, sometimes the intervention you apply is no longer effective or it's not as effective, which to me meant there's something really influential about education, even in health outcomes.
Hmm.
And so for me, I just started looking at the data. I've always been a numbers person. And I remember seeing some of the most compelling studies I've ever seen in my life, and studies we still talk about to this day, said that if a black student in between kindergarten and third grade has one black teacher, they're 13% more likely to enroll in college. If you add a second one, that number goes all the way from 13 up to 32%. There's another study around that same time that came out that said, looked at black students in upper elementary, and they specifically looked at black boys who were on free and reduced lunch, kindergarten through eighth grade. And they found that if they had one black teacher, they were 39% less likely to drop out of high school. And being in a non-education background, seeing those numbers, I'm like, this is incredible.
Absolutely.
Like, this is life changing. And the thing I appreciated about it, those studies never said that these teachers, these black teachers, had gone through this professional development, did this many hours of training, or came from XYZ University. These were black teachers who were mutable qualities, had undeniable value on these students. And I'm like, that's the type of impact I want to have. And so I decided I want to become a teacher. And so bringing this back of me saying like how I got led to Minnesota, once I decided to teach, I wanted to teach in the place I felt like I'd have the most impact, right? Obviously, home Chicago, so that's the first place I looked. But to do my due diligence, I ended up looking at Minnesota. And what I saw was a list, an article that ranked the best public education systems in the nation. Number one was Massachusetts. Number two was Minnesota. And I was like, Minnesota's interesting. So I look into Minnesota more, and I feel like almost the very next article I see says biggest black white education gaps.
Hmm.
Number one is Wisconsin. Number two is Minnesota. And when I saw that paradox, I was like, this is the place. I'm like, this is a place where the infrastructure for education is incredibly strong and powerful, and it's evident by this high ranking. What's also evident is the fact that these inequities manifest explicitly in education and they're very pervasive. Hence, the second largest black white education achievement gap, the lowest black and Latinx graduation rate in the nation. And when I saw that dichotomy, I was like, that's where I want to go. And so that's a little bit about who I am and really what led me to where I am now.
You know, Marcus, that's powerful. There's this aspect I think you've heard of. I know you very well of that understanding your why. And once you understand your why, it will show you exactly where to go. I also love the fact of how it's important that you do what you love, and what you love is applied with your strengths to the places that is most need and appreciated that will give you the best outcome. It sounds like that you have more or less aggregated all of that together. And so I want to commend you. But a question for you, one of the things as we talk about this incredible platform that you have that is targeting towards a critical need, what are some of the major challenges and hurdles that you're dealing with as you try to execute upon this big conundrum in Minneapolis? And it begins with partnering with those who are aligned with you, that really are committed to your goals, and that is shared vision and shared goals. What are some of the challenges that you face? And I'd like to know what are some of the wins that you've been able to see thus far.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first challenge is obvious, right? My organization is Black Men Teach. And so there's over 60,000 teachers in the state of Minnesota. 875 are Black. So proportionally, that's less than 1.5%. Black men represent less than half of 1% of all the teachers in the state. And so the profession is incredibly isolated. That's number one. And it's also a challenge to get people to consider, or Black men in particular, consider this idea of teaching, because there's so many things that can make teaching feel unattractive.
Yes.
And so we have to navigate some of these myths and misconceptions, but some of these actualities about the profession that get men to start to consider this as a way that they can, just like me, fulfill and manifest their purpose. And so I think that's the biggest challenge. I think the next biggest challenge for us is we do a lot and we have a relatively small team. And so I think we've been successful at building out programs and actually been really successful at recruiting, which is one of the wins I'll come back to. And the success has amplified faster than we can scale the infrastructure of the organization.
Okay.
And so this idea of like scaling up internally so that we can have the bandwidth and my team isn't all running at 95 miles an hour, that takes a little bit more time. And so there's some lag in our programs capacity and our internal staff's capacity. And I think the last challenge is something that I haven't directly faced, but something I'm thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this threat, right? There's an organization called the Fearless Fund. They fund, I think they're similar to like a venture capitalist firm for Black women-led organizations. So they provide grants to help build capacity for Black women who are in business. And they got sued. And because of the precedent set by the Supreme Court when they removed affirmative action, right? Now it opens up organizations like us that are race-based, very gender-specific, to possible lawsuits. And really, it's just like this idea that some people sitting at home, we're up in Minnesota, they might be down where you are in Texas and bored, and Black mentees comes across their radar. They want to just take a shot to see if I can get some money out of it. And that's one of the challenges that we haven't directly faced, but the threat is there. So I think, again, those are some of our challenges.
You know, that threat that you've just talked about is real, without question. And you know, as you've talked about it, it's real. And I guess the next opportunity, and I know that your organization is assessing that threat and understanding the impact, as well as how to mitigate that threat. Because I do believe in any business, there's uncertainty and there's risk, but there's also understanding the threats that are externally. And for those businesses that are successful are ones that are going to face those threats with a sober mindset, clarity, and of course, looking at the options that are going to be able to either overcome that threat or mitigate it. So thank you for sharing that. A question for you. I've talked about, you talked about, and I think this is a beautiful thing for any business, whether or not it's, and I consider you're still, it's somewhat a little bit about a startup mode, but yet and still you're scaling, you're growing. In some respects, you may be building the airplane while you're flying, but I believe that's okay. I've been involved in businesses like that, and even today. What are one or two big wins that you can share with the audience that you're very proud of with this probably stressed team, but very capable team that you've assembled?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I wanted to come back to that. I didn't want the audience to think I forgot, but also didn't want to ramble for 6 minutes straight. So I think the first is just how we've grown the program. So when I first started, we had about 7 program participants. This was a little over 2 years ago.
Right.
As of today, I think we have just under 75.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's men who are in our pre-service program, where they're either in high school or college, or men who are actually in the classroom teaching. And so we have just over 30 guys in high school. We have about 25, 26 in college, and we have 12 in the classroom. So we have a nice sized group that we've been able to grow. So I think that's number one. Just the fact that we've been able to bring men in, we've been able to sell the message, get them to understand, back to what you said, the why behind teaching, and been able to communicate that in a way where men who have comparable whys have decided, like, let me raise my hand to be a part of this and help move the mission forward and bring more equity in education. I think the second piece is we've had some really compelling supports for our men. And so to date, we've committed roughly $650,000 in student loan debt alleviation. And so for all of our men who come into our program, they have some level of commitment to help attenuate the student loan debt that they've accumulated to the point where they've tried to in order to get into the classroom. And so I think that is a powerful retention and recruitment incentive. But there's something else that's coming up too. And depending on when this drops, your audience might be a little bit ahead of the rest of the audience that we'll have. But we're piloting a home ownership program. And so, because I know you'll be at our gala, that's really when we plan to announce it to the community. But the way it works basically is our men will teach with us for 2 years to demonstrate their commitment to being in the classroom. After that second year, they're eligible for $30,000 down payment assistance that's fully forgivable and interest free over the course of an additional 5 years. So they stay in the classroom, they stay committed, and now they have an opportunity to start building generational wealth. And I think that right there to me is the most compelling recruitment and retention tool that we'll have, without a doubt. And so that to me is something we're incredibly proud of. We're doing that in partnership with Habitat for Humanities here in the Twin Cities.
You know, Marcus, you just talked about I believe in no matter, well, it's important to understand your why. It is also important for any organization to understand what business they're in, whether they're in a relationship business or transaction business. But once you assess that and make that decision, then I think the next thing that's important is you need to develop your story and not just sell your story, but tell your story. And my point and why I'm sharing that with you, as you talked about attracting Black men to Minnesota, I'd like for you to list again the what's in it for me factor. Why should I consider coming to a place that maybe I have never been to, and why should I be part of this particular program? Not just because I believe in and of course in the purpose, but you've talked about home ownership. And please list them again. I want to make sure that the audience understands as you talk about the things that you're providing for those that are going to be, of course, joining you in your program.
Yeah, so there's two sides of it, right? There's the piece that's for the men individually, and then there's also the larger why. And so our men who come through our program, we commit up to $20,000 in last dollar scholarships for all of our men who are coming through our college program. They have access to mentors. We fund therapy support for them because we don't just care about our men becoming teachers. We want our Black men to be whole, healed versions of themselves. We offer a lot of affinity space. We do a lot of fellowship activities. So you have an opportunity to connect with men just on an individual, personal level outside of the profession. Once our men are graduating from college and it's time to be in a classroom position, we're not just like, all right, go out there and teach. We partner with only a small network of schools where we've done work to assess their school building culture and climate to ensure that this is a place that has the foundation in place to be an environment that's conducive to the retention of Black men. We do additional work with those schools around it, around culture, around induction, to ensure that they have the resources necessary to create that environment for our men. And then we provide some student loan debt support. And again, we're piloting this home ownership program. And so for our men, like our goal isn't just to get Black men in the classroom. I think if that was the goal, that is something, it's sufficient. That's important. Black men bring a whole lot, especially at the elementary school level where we work. And so that would be a good goal, but it's not enough because we can do more, right? We need to make sure that our men have a level of financial security, a level of a sense of belonging, connectedness, and then also make sure that those men have access to services that think about them holistically in terms of their health and wellness. And so that's how we think about it. We want our men to be connected, whole, healthy, supported individuals so that they can give to the class, right? Give to the community through their students.
Marcus, I applaud go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Oh no, I just wanted to touch on one more thing because again, those are the direct services they get. But I think the most important thing is you get an opportunity to manifest your calling If you feel like you are committed to Black community uplift, if you feel like you're committed to youth development, if you feel like those things are embodied in who you are as a person, I can't think of a better way than to actualize that than actually being in the classroom with students. And coming and being a part of Black Mentees gives you an opportunity to connect with men and align with men who are exactly the same, who are there for the same reason and are looking to have the same outcome. And you get to come to a place where the need is arguably the greatest in the country. And so that's my thought.
You know, I applaud you for engaging holistically and the individuals that you're attracting. The intersectionality engagement is the way I think of it. And the fact that in order to be successful, it's more than just offering you an opportunity to teach. Not only you're a teacher, you could be a husband, you could be a father, you could be an engaged community provider. There's so many different things, and you've touched on a multitude of areas that Black Men Teach providers and of course offers and support. So I think it's amazing. For those who are looking to get in contact with you and engage with you, this is a two-part question. Of course, the last part, tell us how they can contact you. But first, what are one or two things that they can do to help you?
Yeah, that's
And
a great
don't
question.
and if it's more than one, please, what are some of the things that they can do to help you? Because I think it's important that when we tell our stories, we give people reasons to engage with us and partner with us. So please share.
Yeah, I think the number one thing to me is connect us with men, right? Tell young men, tell boys that they would be great teachers. Because often we never hear that. No one in my life told me I would be a great teacher until I became one. And if anything, folk discouraged me when I decided to teach. And so encourage young men, boys to teach. And if they raise their hand and say they're interested in connecting with us, Cleo, I'm sure you'll share our website, my email, but it's blackmenteach.org, simple, connecting with us. And I think too, I'd be remiss as a nonprofit leader if I didn't say donations always help. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. As you've heard me say before, a closed mouth doesn't get fed, and you have to ask for what you want. Just something for those that are aspiring to open up their own business. I'm an entrepreneur and involved in many different ventures, but whether it's nonprofit or profit, what are probably one or two challenges that you've been able to more or less conquer and get learnings from that you wish that you would have known before you got involved in launching this, that you can share with those that are looking to be where you are?
okay, that's a great question. I think the first one is easy. And someone did tell me, but again, I feel like I have to tell it because it's been so powerful for me. It's this idea of just really trying to find your purpose. Really think about where do your passions lie, where are your talents, how do you combine those best, and how do you lead with that? And how do you do it and like lean into fear sometimes, take leaps in order to do that. So I think there's one thing you'll never regret is pursuing your passion. Even if it doesn't go well, you'll never regret it. Um, so I think that's number one. I think maybe the second one is, leadership is hard. I think it's a very romanticized thing, being the leader of an organization, being a leader of a company. Um, heaviest had that had the wears the crown. It's tough. It's a lot easier for folk to sit back and envision what they would do in your shoes than actually put them things on and walk
Right.
with them and carry the load and do these things and be accountable for your team, be accountable to a board, like have expectations coming to you from all different directions, and then also having the desire to serve and meet those expectations. And so I think don't romanticize the idea of leading an organization. If that's what you want to do it fully understanding all of the implications that come with it. Because there's a lot of ways, one, to manifest your purpose. And it does not have to be being the individual single leader of an organization. And you can do that being a part of a team that's committed to doing the same thing. I actually started my journey to Black Men Teach by trying to be a board member. I saw that they were doing something. I saw that the organization's mission was aligned to my personal mission. So I reached out and I asked, can I sit on your board? And told me no. And so I came back and I said, okay, I understand why maybe I wouldn't make sense to sit on your board. I'm a first year teacher, but I'll convene a group of Black male elementary school teachers. I'll sit on your board as a non-voting member, and I'll liaise the two groups to make sure that the actions of the board, because there's no leader at the time, I'm the first employee they've hired. But of course, at the time, this is before that, there's no leader in place, and no one on the board was a Black man that had experience in education and obviously wasn't a current educator. So I said, let me make sure that perspective is there. I'll liaise the two groups, and I'll be a non-voting member. They said no to that too. And I came back and followed up and asked what were they doing with college students? Because at the time it looked like that was their singular focus. And a lot of the details weren't fleshed out. So I offered to flesh those out. And I did it on like a $2,000 contract. It wasn't about the money. It was about me following my passion. And that inevitably led me to the seat where I am right now. Did not see that coming. Did not anticipate it, would not have told you that was the plan all along. It was a persistence to align my mission with an organization that was doing the same mission. And so I think if I was successful in that, I think that would have been okay. But maybe a third lesson is that persistence is important.
Right.
So
No, I think that's very perfect for people to understand. I've shared with people, as you talked about romanticizing being in the big chair. I said, from afar, the big chair looks very, very nice and sweet. But once you take a seat, there's much heat.
oh yeah,
And you know what? Being able to manage that, one of the things I've been lucky is to have people that were in the chair mentor me and share the real talk that you just shared with the audience here about what it takes to be a leader. Markus, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you shared with everyone today. Markus Flynn, Executive Director for Black Men Teach, blackmenteach.org. That's blackmenteach.org. Get in contact with him, support him, and blessings to you, cousin. All right, we'll talk soon. Take care.
appreciate you, man.
Storytelling is one of the oldest platforms across the world. It's the best way to learn. It's the best way to remember things, but I think it's the best way to communicate who we are, what we do, why we do, and what's in it for you if you're a listener. And lastly, good stories are not only heard, but the best stories are told and retold and shared. So I hope you enjoy my podcast and my guest, and I look forward to you having conversations with Cleo, but also giving your feedback. If there's somebody that you're interested in that you'd like for me to host, let me know. Hey, thank you. All the best, and may God bless. This is Cleophas Franklin. If you want to keep the conversation going with Conversations with Cleo and hear more wonderful stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, then go to coffeewithcleo.com. That's coffeewithcleo.com to purchase any of my books. Again, these stories are built around the people that I'm bringing to you on my podcast from around the globe. But also, every purchase of my book goes to scholarships for underserved and financially challenged students who are pursuing a college education. So your purchase will help them turn their dreams into reality. Again, that's coffeewithcleo.com. Thanks so much. All the best, and I wish you good reading.